Securing dolphins and false killer whales from Japan's drive fisheries was only one of the methods originated by SeaWorld to assure not only a steady supply of these smaller animals, but the larger killer whales as well. Dr. John Hall.
SeaWorld obtained permits from the Fishery Service to import 6 false killer whales in the late 1980s. They sent a capture team to Iki Island, and they caught 12 false killer whales. Numbers 7 through 12 were trucked on a flatbed truck over rough roads from Iki Island all the way to Kamigawa SeaWorld on the east coast of Japan, north of Tokyo. SeaWorld employees then were involved directly in the transport of those 6 false killer whales. They trucked them to Tokyo, put them on a jet freighter, and flew them from Tokyo to Hong Kong to Singapore to Dubai in the Arab Emirates, and then from the Arab Emirates to Amsterdam. They were then trucked to the Dolphinarium in Holland at Harderwijk, and they were used as trading material. They put those animals through immense stress in order to avoid Canadian airspace and possible inspection, knowing that they didn't have permits for them. They traded those 6 false killer whales that they collected in Japan for the killer whale named Gudrun.
Gudrun was officially listed on the U.S. federal importation permit as a breeding loaner to SeaWorld. Historically, U.S. capture permits for dolphins or whales required government scrutiny and public input. For SeaWorld, this meant high visibility and controversy. Yet, if they bought killer whales from other facilities or borrowed them for breeding purposes, they could bring them into the U.S. with little fanfare and less regulation. But that was only half the story. Ken Balcom has been studying the killer whales of Puget Sound, Washington for the past 40 years. After the movie Free Willy was shot, Balcom was originally asked to put together a detailed plan for bringing the star of the movie, Keiko, into the United States from his tank in Mexico City. He set out to learn as much about Keiko as he could.
We found that there were 3 conflicting stories on the origin of Keiko. So we went to Iceland and we talked to Johan Sigurjonsson, who's the biologist for the Fisheries Department of Iceland. Well, the response to blow me clear out of my chair was, maybe he's one of the hidden whales. And the hidden whale was what? I asked him, what's a hidden whale? Well, you know as well as I do, Ken, there are some animals that some people doesn't want anybody to know about. And that was all he'd say.
After SeaWorld agreed not to collect killer whales from Washington state waters, they needed a reliable source of killer whales to replenish and fill their new parks. And so they set up an operation in Iceland whereby an advance team would obtain permits from the Icelandic government to collect live killer whales for export. But because SeaWorld had no U.S. permits for direct importation, they would then fly the killer whales to the Dolphinarium in Holland or to the Canadian Oceanarium at Niagara Falls, and they would stash the whales for months or in some cases years, while back in the U.S., SeaWorld would then approach the National Marine Fisheries Service and apply for permits to import already captured animals for their breeding program, indicating that the source of the original collections may well be unknown to anyone.
According to Hall, SeaWorld officials caught whale after whale in Iceland, shipping them from Reykjavik to marine parks in Holland, the United Kingdom, France, and Canada. And from 1976 to 1978, at least 9 whales were sent directly from Iceland to SeaWorld in the United States. In October of 1987, SeaWorld was back, with Don Goldsberry, Brad Andrews, and Jim Antrim, SeaWorld's then vice president and general curator, operating on an Icelandic herring seiner called the Gudrun. After the three men were photographed by the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, SeaWorld ordered them to leave Iceland immediately, stating that they had only been there to conduct killer whale surveys, even though an exhaustive survey had just been completed, and a holding tank in Reykjavik was filled with water and ready for whales.